Do-do-do-do-do-dum. Okay. Hey guys. So I hope you're all having a great week and everybody's doing really good. I've had such great conversations with you guys and in the messages we've been sending back and forth. And I've just been so inspired lately to keep on producing more and more material. So by the end of this short discussion, I'm hoping that you'll have a few tools of visualization and a few beginner steps on how to start using your insight and your gut instincts. The more consciously aware we become of our influences and our intuition, that is really how our psychic strength increases. Now, this isn't going to be, making things float in the air and bending spoons at our own will. Maybe as soon as I start being able to do that kind of stuff, I'll let you guys know. And maybe that will be Psychic Powers 201. But for now, these are skills I picked up while having my out of body experiences, recognizing my consciousness itself was really influencing and impacting everything that was happening to me in a very pronounced way while out of body. And I recognized, since then that the same kind of thoughtfulness and the same kind of awareness of my own focus actually continues to impact my normal everyday life, even though maybe it's not quite as pronounced. But what I've found is as time goes on, and the more aware and the more consistently aware I've been of my focus, my intentions, it actually increases more and more and more and more. So now that subtle voice, the subtle morality or balance, the internal voice within, it becomes a bit louder and a bit louder and a bit louder. Now, I'm also going to talk about this concept of our higher self. And right off the bat, I'd like to say that subtle internal balance, our conscience, as it's called, I'm just going to come out and say, in my own opinion, that is our higher self. Or another way of looking at it is our greater portion of spirit. Because I don't necessarily see it as a higher self. It's a different self. And quite possibly, especially according to my own experience, this spirit, this core self, seems to be of a grander portion. Or you could say more powerful or more, just kind of has his shit together a little more than maybe I do. But so the sort of very, very first thing is becoming aware of what I call the ring of possibilities. As we go through our day-to-day life, there's all these influences that sort of try to put themselves and occupy themselves and take up the biggest portions of our focus. Whether it's a TV or it's a magazine on the table, whether it's our keys that we use to go to work, whether it's our computer screens, whether all of these things, the grocery stores, our entire life is filled with this ring of possibilities. And we are literally bombarded on a day-to-day basis of, oh, look at me, invest your energy in me, invest your money in me. Or there's very little focus on ourselves. Especially in a Western society, there isn't a commercial that comes on TV and says, hey, I think 5 minutes of meditation would really do you well right now, and why don't you turn me off and take a few minutes to focus on yourself? Well, that that just is not a very good ad campaign um, for whatever advertisement. But anyway, when we start to become aware of this ring of influences, we can start to notice what portions of our day are going to what. And this is where we can start, because of this awareness, we can start to push the balance more in our favor. I know we so many of us, we've got a 40-hour or more work week. So to push that aside and have a 40-hour self week isn't really possible. But when we can start to take our days apart and we can start to be more aware of this ring of influences, we can start to at least push the balance a little bit more in our favor. We can apply our consciousness and our awareness more in our favor more often, even when we are in circumstances that we'd rather not be in, that are not very spiritually fruitful. So, this idea of applying your consciousness. Now, I've talked about experiences I've had before, and I'll be in very short. I've gone out of body and been in a very anxious state of mind, and sure enough, the environment around me was like an anxious hellfire. It was unstable. It was a perfect match to my anxiety. Then, as soon as I sort of settled down and took a deep breath and told myself, now, just try and calm down, what appeared like hellfire around me calmed down into these very stable blue lines, stacked blue lines. And the space around me, in real time, without hesitation, instantly matched my consciousness. Another sort of story, this is much less far out. I used to do a lot of food demoing jobs, which would require me to stand in one place in grocery stores for very long periods of time. And when I wouldn't be sort of dazing out and meditating while I'm standing there, I'd actually be doing my job. Or I would kind of notice just little things around me, and, that's another thing. We start to be more aware of these little subtleties that happen around us. Anyway, something I noticed one day is, I was set up right in front of the bread aisle, and this woman picks up a loaf of bread and she drops it. And, she puts it back, no big deal. An hour later, somebody comes up to the bread aisle again, they pick up a loaf of bread and they drop it. And I thought, that's kind of funny. And they pick it up, they put it back. Another hour later, a third person goes up to the bread aisle, picks up another loaf of bread, and then they drop it. And I thought, this is really quite strange. So I've noticed similar things when, say somebody hits a home run, suddenly the pitcher doesn't do as well, and suddenly all the batters are batting a little bit better. The point I'm trying to make is that our consciousness imprints our environment in a very real way. So if someone's dropping this loaf of bread, they're setting an imprint in the space that makes it more likely for bread to be dropped. I don't know if there's really anything to it, but I have a very strong gut feeling that actually consciousness is imprinting itself all over the place, all of the time. So This is why I think places will have a good vibe, right? It's because people were there, they were happy, they were smiling, there's laughter kind of still in the air. All those good feelings are still in the air. Now you go to like a seedy bar and you go out like into the back alley and it's got, not only does it look grungy, it's got a really bad vibe. You don't know if people have been beat up out here or, you know, somebody's feeling so down and so wasted that it's just, the feeling just lingers. And at the same time, I've sort of noticed this within my own house, sort of in the dusty corners, the darker, dusty corners of my house. It's almost as though there's a lingering consciousness that's sort of there until I go clean it up and spruce it up. Or I've really noticed it with my bookshelf. Every single one of the books almost feels as though it's calling out to you to, pick me up and focus on me and let me have my influence on you. And this part of your house, the bookshelf, is like this powerhouse of like recorded data and it almost emanates it. And, then internally we have these connotations to like, a nice bookshelf or a library as this like powerhouse of knowledge. And these are consciousness imprints. And I feel like this is also how some diseases work. There'll be a sort of like energetic stagnation within a person. And until they acknowledge that and they clear that up, that consciousness, that stagnation is going to remain. So it's almost like we have plus and minus, or happy and sad, but not quite. It's more sophisticated than that. This is also where real magic comes into play. When you are consciously using your consciousness and you are emitting, such energy, you believe it so truly, the environment can't help itself but to match what you are putting out, what you are imprinting. Now, if you doubt your abilities or you doubt your intuition, that doubt is actually putting up a wall to your consciousness, I'm convinced, so that connection, that subtle voice, it just doesn't have a chance. All the other all the other options in that ring of possibilities, they are getting their chance, and we doubt our own capacity to trust ourselves and that intuition, that higher self, that higher insight. It just doesn't have the bridge to connect. There's with your consciousness itself, almost like one of those train stations where the rail can rotate and connect, up to 50 different, or not 50, but like, 5 or 6 different rail connections. If we're not allowing the open door, then there's nobody going to be coming through. And that, that right there, the open door analogy, also can be positive or negative. We can also open the door to some nasty energy, some nasty consciousness, that, hey, it's just looking to express itself. It's looking for an avenue of expression. And if we supply that connection, then it's going to flow. That's how these things seem to work. So now that we're starting to get this idea of this ring of possibilities, the way we're applying our consciousness, our own self-doubt, or our own like internal belief empowerment, that's the kind of approach you can start to have with all the environments around you. Your workplace, your home, your school, When you're out in nature, that's the best. That's really my favorite. I'll go out on a hike and I'll be complimenting all the trees on, how strong they appear. I'll compliment the flowers on how brilliant their colors are right now. And you can feel a subtle reaction, almost as though the trees are surprised. Someone is acknowledging them, and they sort of are dusting the sleepies out of their eyes and are bashfully appreciative of your compliment. And the little leaves on the flower are again sort of like, oh, you're acknowledging me. um I once had an out of body experience where suddenly the place appeared sort of murky, but the presence of all the consciousness there was so ecstatic and happy. And it was these little like, they look like little gremlins from that movie. These little furry gremlin creatures, they're dancing around, and they're fighting to be my center of attention. They're simultaneously dancing and also being like, me, no, look at me, no, look at me. um, and the reason they were so excited, they were chanting, essentially, yeah, they were chanting, he's not judging us, he's not judging us. um, and just in that instance, I thought, oh, these little creatures they're connecting with my consciousness. Um, they picked up directly in a direct communication that I'm not out to get them. I'm not poised to really have anything to do with them than to just have a look of wherever we are. And they're just so happy. It was just such an easy connection. It felt good for everybody around, and it was like a little hole of sunshine opened up in their otherwise sometimes murky day. Um, and it was fascinating to me to see each one of them actually pushing over each other to be right in my center of view. Um, this is one of these subtleties I wanted to get the chance to discuss. What we actually cast our view upon is more important than I think we normally consider. What are we looking at, and when do we look at it? Um, taking glances at a person who walks by and then quickly looking away. Or you hear something on TV and then you go into the other room and you have a look at it. You hear a loud noise and you turn and you look at it. There's some kind of an energetic transfer that happens through our observation itself, I'm convinced. It sort of has to do with what I'm talking about and sort of doesn't. It's just another layer of being aware of our awareness, to the point where we're aware of, how much focus we're applying on individual things. One experience, I looked over at a book cover and it was a very dark, like neon colored. The energy to it was sort of sarcastic and cynical and, wanted to be aggressive and tough. And I could just feel from that artwork and that intention that was put into it, it was just so much more pronounced. And it really made me recognize, wow, we are so bombarded by all of these packets of consciousness, all of this compressed influences, that someone else, they packed all of their consciousness into it and then put it out into the world. And we're just not recognizing this grander scheme of our consciousness, our applied consciousness, that's it, our applied consciousness. So this also brings up synchronicities. Now, when we are looking around our ring of presences or our ring of influences, possibilities that I'm talking about, I've seen it many times as though I am the nucleus of an atom and the world around me is the space within a cell. And each one of us is a nucleus of consciousness. And the things which surround us on an everyday basis are like the electrons, the building blocks that make up our day-to-day existence. So in this kind of a view of life as though we're the center of an atom, this is where I feel like synchronicities actually are operating, because our consciousness becomes so charged on a particular point of focus. It's as though the environment around us cannot help itself but to match us like a magnet. So just like in chemistry, certain chemicals, they cannot help it, but as soon as they're next to each other, they just snap together and form a new chemical bond. This goes the same for our environments. And with these subtle expressions of consciousness here and there, we sometimes will get this direct connection. And that direct connection it's just a match of consciousness or a match of a quality of thought. Now, I'll get a lot of these synchronicities. I'll say a certain, something, I'll be really excited about something. I'll be like, oh, what about this? And then I'll hear a horn outside, seem to respond. Or I'll say a certain phrase and then they'll say the exact same words on the radio or the TV that's playing in the background. All these little things, like sometimes I think when the house settles around you, you'll hear a tap on the glass of your window sometimes. Or my oven will like creak, and seem to be, the timing is almost a little uncanny, how perfect it will be sometimes. And little things like that, those are some of these suggestions of starting to pick up on the subtleties of our connection with our environment and our consciousness. It's all really one and the same. So, and at the same time, I don't necessarily want to give synchronicities too much sway over my life. It's the same attitude I have towards things like tarot cards or other divinations. I think they can be great assistants or help to broaden your view, but when people start to form their lives around synchronicities and tarot cards and divination, that's basically handing over the driver's seat to someone else. That's ultimately giving an exterior influence power over your life, a direct influence over you. So for me, it's something I have, I'll laugh at it, I'll pay attention to it, I'll get lots of threes all the time. I'll see, once while playing a video game, I got a very important phone call and I had to pause the game, and it was, it was an important, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like this important conversation with somebody, and it was like, it was kind of this a turning point of sorts. And I go back to the racing game, and I was on lap 3 of 3 in third place, and my total time for the lap was 3 minutes, 33 seconds, and 333 milliseconds. literally every single spot that could have been a 3 was. I had an alarm clock go off at 3:33 in the morning. We'd never set the alarm clock before, and I checked the settings of this alarm clock. It was still set to the factory default of midnight. So I, for the life of me, could not figure out how it triggered itself at 3:33 in the morning. But again, I was weary. I was like, this something, it doesn't quite feel right about it. But it's still pretty cool. So there you go. Now, let me see. That's really the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. Within the scope of our own psyche and our own mind. So I think what I'll do now is I'll go into these tips of visualization. So, like many others, I had this very strong drive to see something that's a little more than normal reality. I wanted to see the phenomena. I wanted, you want to see a ghost or you want to see a UFO, and I don't know if fortunate is the word, but I've been fortunate to where I have seen ghosts, I have seen UFOs, which actually that brings up another point I wanted to mention before I get into the visualizations here, is because I desired to see ghosts and desired to see UFOs, and that came from my heart. That didn't come from a exterior system. That drive was very genuine. I think that planted a seed that as the years continued, it made it a more of a likelihood for it to occur to me, because it was this authentic question. It was this authentic desire of mine, and that's what reality does. It delivers according to the input. It will deliver. And this is again is where real magic comes into play. You don't get an instantaneous reaction unless you're like a insane sorcerer. But in a day-to-day kind of a scenario, it's more as though we are planting a seed of hope. And because we put that intention out there, it opens up the possibility a little bit wider. It makes it a little bit more likely to happen. So you plant these seeds, and then you don't necessarily water it physically, but you nurture it with intentions. You nurture it with your consciousness, with your qualities of thoughts, all the different parts about it that sort of offer it this nutrition, so that initial intention that you planted in a you could imagine this in the fourth dimension, or in the realm of thought, the non-physical level of reality around us. You're doing farm work. You're planting seeds. You're offering nutrition, and you're keeping track of the growth. And eventually, you get you reach that total fruition, and it'll reach its blossom, or the fruit will bear. So that's another level to this, where you start planting all these seeds, and with patience and with care, these seeds will grow. So now with the visualizations, the first one that works surprisingly well is on a very clear day with no clouds on the sky. Let yourself relax and just look up into nothing but the blue. I have a feeling that the blue sky is there for a reason. That sounds really silly, but it's almost as though nature knows we need just like a big flat blue to sort of like look into, and it's kind of good for us. I don't know. But when you're focusing on just the blue sky, start to notice the very subtle, um, basically grids that you'll see. These different, they look like when you look at a bright light source and then you close your eyes, you see what's called an after image. You can notice, especially in a clear blue sky on a bright day, these very subtle grids, very subtle intersecting lines, very subtle, they're not floaters. They're actually, what look like these subtle sparkles, that seem to dip and bob around each other and have a mind of their own. Completely different than floaters. They don't look like how floaters will look like little amoebas, like cells. These actually look like little shiny bits of glitter that are only like halfway there. So when you can start to notice, hey, wow, there's this subtle layer of something in the blue sky that I never saw before. Maybe didn't see before consciously, but I believe we can all really see it, but because it is so subtle, we never pay attention to it. And so much of our lives is like that. There are these powerful, powerful subtleties that are trying to communicate to us this whole, deeper layer of life. And we are just too distracted. There's too much going on in our day-to-day lives that, we can't focus on that subtlety. So looking up in the blue sky and starting to see that layer that you may or may have not seen before. So that's step one. And then step two is like a white wall in your house. What works really well is like stucco, or where it's not a perfectly flat white wall, but it has the sort of endless like stucco texture. There's a lot of texture. And this next step will basically work with any well-lit surface that has a great deal of texture. Carpet also works very well. And what you do is you focus on just one small, minute point, and you do not move your eyes at all. And you just stay in that focused point. And what will begin to happen is the carpet around your view, you'll begin to start seeing some interesting layering effects in the texture. And from my own experience, you'll actually start to see visions of faces and animals and different, just sort of archetypal forms that will build themselves out of the texture. This also works in the middle of a forest. If you stare, you have a very dense group of trees and you stare at one spot, you'll actually see all the wavy leaves of everything else. It will start to sort of layer on top of itself, and our consciousness will seem to build out of the texture which we are focusing on. As soon as you divert your gaze elsewhere, that layering effect diminishes and the effect won't quite work. But these kind of endless landscapes they look like cartoon characters and insects with ducks and like aliens and lions and statues of people. These sort of, it's as though everything is changing, yet somehow it remains perfectly still. That is exactly the type of surfaces that I've encountered while out of body, except just much, 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 much more pronounced, where the little caricatures will, jump up off the surface and start to completely have a life of their own. So that's another one. Another great one, of course, is closing your eyes and facing the sun. I recommend sunscreen for this. But in that sort of golden warmth that you will see behind your closed eyes, in the golden warmth, you'll start to see, I see these things that look like little flying seagull patterns, or little flocks of birds. They're much more like simple geometry shapes, but I'll see this kind of these growing like flower petal shapes, and these little like flying bird things. And your mind has just become so crystal clear. And actually, in a state like that is a perfect opportunity to feel into the light of the sun, and very casually be like, "Hey, how are you doing today, sunshine? How are you doing, consciousness of the sun?" And just feel into the initial response that you get. And the same goes for when you're connecting with the earth and you're like, "Hey, how are you doing? Mama Earth, what's going on with you? Thank you so much for everything." The gratitude that you apply sort of gets the ball rolling in a good direction. And if you don't second guess the responses that you feel, I think so many times we assume, oh, that's just some random thought that is echoing off of me just thinking this. But really, I think there's more to it than that. Again, it's this immensity that can be discovered within the subtleties. And that was another thing I wanted to mention. You connect with these different things in your life, and you feel into them, and you listen for that response, and take it for what it's worth. It's probably, I'm not saying to make major life changes, but I think I was surprised at what I received, at how it's been some helpful insight, connecting and feeling into. I know people will talk about that, but maybe I wanted to reiterate it again and make it as clear as it could possibly be. So the last the part I wanted to leave on here is, now, what is all that you're talking about? What does this have to do with your higher self? Well, in that ring of possibilities and influences, one of those influences is your greater portion of spirit, as I like to put it. Based on my own experience with it seemed as though I met myself, and wouldn't it was so surprising that version of me seemed to know me better than I knew myself. So that's why I say it seemed to be this grander portion of myself. And I bring more of me through when I really can, and when I really line everything up and I'm really driven and I make it happen. More of our soul will come through us in the moment, when it really needs to. There seems to be some sort of level of efficiency. If you're just going to be kind of crapping around all day and not really doing anything, well, your spirit's, it's not going to be going out of its way to be 100% present. So in the experience I had, this was one of the talks with a couple of you guys I had in the messages that have been so great, by the way. Was, so I'm thinking around me and being so enamored with the molecular world and how light is, hitting the surface of everything around me. And I'm seeing these textures come alive, and all of the little critters are coming out of the woodworks, and all these feelings are like becoming more and more crystal clear than usual. All of a sudden, I sort of focused on, wow, this is so cool that I even have the capacity to recognize what's going around. And I just was really appreciative of my own capacity in that moment. Not in an egoic way of like, aren't I so great? I can, sing the stars and the moon if I want to and make them appear. No, it was like, I am so grateful to nature to have this imagination, to have the ability to comprehend and wonder in the mystery. And as I focused on the capacity itself, that is when all of a sudden the ring of all these influences and possibilities, I was focusing on that sort of narrow up and center part, that is that direct connection to what we could call our conscience, or our moral integrity, or our intuition itself. So that became my primary focus in this very sensitive, pronounced state. All the other ring of possibilities, they just died down, and I was only focused on my intuition, on my perception, on the pilot within the body. And in that moment, there was such this intensity of myself. It was like another presence. It was almost like I was reintegrating with a source of my consciousness that's always there, sort of remotely. And he kind of had this attitude of like, well, where have you been? Kind of joking, like, usually we're not this connected. This is a very remarkably conscious connection right now. And basically what I had to say with myself was, thank you. The earth me, the higher self me was thanking the earth me for doing what I was doing, because he had other stuff, or I had other stuff I needed to do elsewhere, but the portion of me sent to earth had some very important work to do, so that he could be doing what he was doing without having to also be doing the stuff I'm here on earth doing. So our effectiveness of development, it was like, 10 times more than what it could have been. And he told me, like, yes, we're all here and we're all keeping track of our spirits on earth, and we're essentially pleased and proud, and it is what it is kind of thing. And that also went out of his way to say, we're not going to do more for you than you do for yourself. We're not going to come in there and, basically take care of all your problems for you, because you're not taking care of yourself, and that isn't going to stick. That's not actually developing. That is like spoon feeding. That is like you're doing something for somebody and they're not learning in the meantime. So he said, I'm not going to disrespect you by coming in there and taking care of things for you. Also, all you really need is the love. And as long as you have love, even in the shittiest circumstance, it is impermanent. It's not going to last forever. But what does remain and what will be around and kind of always there waiting is that love. It's a matter of us reorienting ourselves and making that more the priority. Um, Even when it seems as though our world around us is trying to force us away from that um, sort of energetic resource, that's sort of nature challenging us to develop resilience so that kind of in any circumstance, we make that strive to make a stronger connection to our grander portion of self, and we strive to make that stronger connection to love. So, and yes, I believe, anybody can connect to their grander portion of self if they just try to do it and insist on it. It will happen. So that's going to do it for this week. This last thing I'd like to mention is please, 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 please leave. I want to start a discussion down below in the comment section. Any of your own insights, things that have worked for you, your own discoveries. I want you to write with everyone. I want to start up a discussion with all of us. And things that have worked for you, or things that you just can't quite get past, or maybe questions you have for someone else, or anything, anything that comes to mind. I just, please, 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 would like to start a discussion at the bottom of these in the future. So that's it for now. I've got another topic of discussion that I'd like to do for next time when I get the chance. And that's another thing I'd like for people to leave comments below is topics that they would like to hear more about. And I'll see what I can dig up and see what kind of links or anything I can just sort of help to point the direction to. So I can be some influential guidance as well. But that is basically it, guys. So much love and just gratitude and good vibes all around. You guys are seriously just so awesome and cool. I love the messages you send me and the discussions we have, and it really feeds my soul. So thank you everyone for that, and until next time, have a great life. Until then, bye-bye.